Coercion doesn't end with compliance, cooperation, or even compromise. No, it gets worse. The boss who continues to get his workforce to work overtime, unpaid overtime, is not a boss that's going to stop doing that. The parent who manipulates and coerces a child into the vision that they see fit, that's not a parent who's going to stop that in childhood. That's something that will continue throughout adulthood. The abusive partner who coerces the partner into doing certain things or not doing certain things, that's not a partner that's going to stop anytime soon. Why? Because coercion doesn't end with compliance, cooperation, or even compromise. It gets worse. Why? Because it's human nature to push boundaries. Now imagine that human nature with a more nefarious attitude and agenda. See, it's like the toddler who climbs up to the biscuit tin, goes and grabs the chair, pulls it up to the kitchen cupboard, starts climbing up to the top cupboard for the biscuit tin. Well, that toddler's going to keep climbing until it hears that very powerful term, no. Why? Because like adults, like human nature, the toddler's going to push boundaries until the toddler hears no. And it's the same with adults. It's the same with anybody who's pushing coercion, because coercion doesn't end with compliance, cooperation, or even compromise. It gets worse until that very powerful word breaks the cycle. No.
This year and last year, we have seen unprecedented levels of authoritarian power grabs in countries all over the world, always carried out in the name of protecting people, which is what tyrants always say when they want to control people. But that authoritarian insanity has also resulted in an unprecedented number of people who are finally starting to question things. When someone starts to feel ignored, neglected, mistreated, and abused by those in power, there are often several stages that person goes through. If they've always seen themselves as good citizens because they've always followed the rules, it can be a bit of a shock when they come to realize that the rules, more often than not, benefit a few greedy bastards and harm everyone else. They may begin to feel indignant at having been mistreated by those in power when for so long they prided themselves on being law-abiding taxpayers, while assuming, even if only subconsciously, that that meant that things would go well for them. Just do as you're told and everything will be okay, right? So they may start by being angry at particular politicians who happen to be in power at that moment. If not for the bad decisions of those people, they think, this wouldn't have happened. Ironically, supporters of both major parties in such a situation will usually blame the other party while overlooking the fact that their own party was at least complacent and negligent, if not outright cooperating in the injustice. The first stage of rebelliousness of the victims of injustice is, therefore, to argue against one set of political opportunists in favor of a different set of political opportunists, threatening to vote out the rascals they think are responsible for the situation and vote in new rascals. The abused citizen may angrily comment on the matter, privately or publicly, and may even write to their congressman expressing their dissatisfaction, and may insist and demand that the problem be remedied post-haste. But what are such demands backed by? Usually, absolutely nothing. Like a little child on a playground demanding that the bully, 3 times his size, stop picking on him, it's really just pathetic begging. It's not demanding anything. The closest thing the average political victim will threaten to do is wait a few years and then vote for a different politician who will also end up betraying and abusing him. Deep down inside, the wronged citizen knows damn well that his own whining and complaining carries exactly no weight compared to the influence of those people and corporations with nearly unlimited funding and connections. Nonetheless, the outraged citizen, not knowing what else to do, continues to tilt at windmills, as they say, begging for the politicians to please stop abusing him, while spouting empty cliches such as, "You work for me and I pay your salary." And the abuse continues. Next, those abused by the system may get zealously politically active, forming or joining organizations and movements, having protests, handing out flyers and petitions, and complaining about how what's happening is unfair or unconstitutional, or even putting up their own candidates for this or that political office. In a dozen different ways, they desperately try to use the system to finally serve the interests of the little guy instead of always serving big money interests, whoever can afford lobbyists, etc. And the abuse continues. Countless well-intentioned people throw vast amounts of time, energy, hope, and money at the political system, and in return, the system gives them nothing. Except every once in a while, some little scrap, which is usually trivial and taken away soon thereafter. And the abuse continues. But what else can be done when you've ranted and raved and petitioned and voted and protested and begged until you're blue in the face, and those who wield power still demonstrate that they just don't care what you want? What then? Maybe a bigger protest, maybe vote even harder next time. You can try, telling yourself that at least you're doing something, and the abuse will continue. Now, you may be encouraged when you see hundreds or even thousands of people showing up outside some Capitol building in whatever state or country and loudly saying what they think, telling those politicians just how much they disapprove of the politicians' actions. But then what? What do you expect to happen as a result? Were you under the impression that the politicians really care about you but just weren't quite sure of what you wanted? Are these politicians well-intentioned and noble, but possibly hard of hearing or something? So a bunch of people loudly asking for freedom might make them see the error of their ways. No. Deep down inside, you already know that the politicians know what you want. They just don't care at all. They knew you wouldn't like this. They knew it would hurt you. They did it anyway. If some little kid is being stomped on by a bully 3 times his size, is it really going to help to tell the bully that it hurts and that the child really wants it to stop? Might the bully suddenly proclaim, "Oh, my mistake. I thought you were enjoying this. I will stop at once." So at this point, the victim of authoritarian abuse is in the stage of feeling totally frustrated and helpless, mistreated and unheard, neglected and victimized. And as a victim, he starts to lose hope, finally, in the process, in voting and petitioning, in the political system. The victim finally lets himself see and accept what has been true all along. The politicians don't represent you. They rule you. They are not public servants. They are your masters. They are exploiters and thieves, tyrants and abusers. You can't appeal to their consciences. They don't have those. They are not just misguided. They did not just make a mistake. They treat you as subjects because they view you as subjects, and always have. They walk all over you with an occasional dash of dishonest rhetoric now and then to make you think that they give a damn about you. They will do whatever they want, rob you and control you, victimize and abuse you, and they expect you to take it. Now, they expect you to whine and complain on occasion, but at the end of the day, they also expect you to comply and obey. And as long as you do, they couldn't care less about what else you think or say or do. You are bleating sheep to them. If they notice the noise at all, they're laughing at you. Look at the poor peasants pleading with us as if we care what the livestock wants. They have their multi-million-dollar donors, the people who own their souls. Why on earth would they set aside all the power, money, and influence they get from playing that game just to do what you want? Just to give you a little more freedom? Why would you ever expect that of them? Why would you even bother asking that of them? So, what? A revolution? Time to break out the guillotines? Civil war? Charge off and overthrow the government? Mayhem and bloodshed? An understandable thought, and sometimes even a justified one, but not necessary and ultimately not really useful. How many revolutions in history, in short order, just ended up creating a new ruling class that was just as bad as the one before, or worse? Pretty much all of them. And yes, that includes the American Revolution. What Congress and the state governments do here to the people on a daily basis is far worse than anything that King George III ever even dreamed of. And besides, who among us is really eager and willing to trade in the relatively easy existence we now have with the widespread, prolonged death and destruction of a revolution? No thanks. Thankfully, there is a much more effective way, and while it is physically pretty easy, psychologically it can be very difficult and uncomfortable for all those who've always believed somewhere in the back of their minds that sooner or later the system will provide justice, that the good guys will win, that those who follow the rules will be rewarded, and that if we wave a flag and pledge allegiance, tyrants will fail. But that is, and has always been, a lie. Oppression and tyranny always happen in the name of law, not in spite of it. Freedom is always illegal. Listen carefully and at least let this one concept sink in. Freedom is always illegal. Those who wield power always use it to enrich themselves and their buddies at the expense of the freedom and prosperity of everybody else. Always. People don't run for office and seek positions of power in order to leave you alone. They do it so they can rob, dominate, and control you. Deep down inside, you know this is true about all politicians everywhere, including the ones you voted for. Whatever dishonest rhetoric they want to use about representing the people and being public servants, you know damn well that the people in power sought out power for themselves. With that in mind, asking them to allow you your liberty is insane. The problem isn't just them, it's also you. If you are still waiting for permission from politicians to be free, you've already lost. You won't get it, ever. But more importantly, you don't need it. People spend so much time focusing on the dictates of so-called legislators and so much time begging for the ruling class to please be nice to them that they miss the fact that the politicians and their stupid and or evil commands don't matter if the people don't obey. The victims of authoritarian injustice always vastly outnumber those who oppress and abuse them. Always. Tyranny mainly happens not because of the small number of sociopaths who try to rule the world, but because of the masses of well-intentioned people who obey those sociopaths as if they have the right to rule everyone else. To put it another way, the main problem and the solution does not reside in the minds of the demented, power-happy control freaks. It resides in the minds of everybody else. If the people stop viewing criminals as some rightful authority and stop obeying their decrees, the politicians' power evaporates. And that is what has to happen to stop this. Not votes, not petitions, not protests, not political campaigns. Disobedience and resistance. If you will only live as a free human being when politicians tell you you're allowed to, then you are a slave forever. If you still think you need legislative permission to live your own life and make your own choices, then you're already doomed. As Stephen Biko put it, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And if you still feel an obligation to obey whatever arbitrary crap the political crooks decide to call law, then you are the one enriching and empowering these psychos. You are the one cooperating with and enabling this injustice. If you still take pride in being a law-abiding taxpayer, which literally means that you are proud to blindly obey the oppressive dictates of sociopaths and proud to fund their heinous machine, then you are the problem. If you really want to be part of the solution, you need to back your brain out of the authoritarian indoctrination it's been dragged through your whole life and realize that in a time of widespread institutionalized injustice, law and authority are always on the side of evil. And those on the side of righteousness are always considered criminals by the psychopaths who demand their obedience. So if you want to see freedom and justice prevail, then learn to be a criminal. Learn how to disobey destructive and immoral commands, even when those commands are called law. Learn how to trust your own soul and your own conscience and put what you know is right above what the parasites say is legal. Stop waiting for and begging for a political solution. There is none and never will be. And when you demand freedom, actually demand it. That doesn't mean making a pathetic request to the very people who rob and abuse you. It doesn't mean protests and voting. It means disobeying, and it means resisting by any means necessary.
Now, trying to look at the situation we're in and what to do about it, I still believe the best form of rebellion is non-compliance. I really do. People just need to open their businesses. They need to support people who are opening their businesses. Any of these fines and anything the government's giving them, challenge them, because none of them are lawful. And call these people out. Get them to prove their claims. The virus is the government. The virus is the media. And these are the questions we need to be asking. You people are actually our employees and you're all in abuse of office. That's the attitude that has to happen, folks. We could get out of this if enough people wake up. But, you know, I think a good thing for people to do at this time is to create some time capsules so that whatever does happen, whatever story they tell the people in the future, create a time capsule, put in some writing, put in maybe a USB stick. Who knows whether they'll have electricity, but hey, put in a USB stick anyway with some information on it. And write notes, write a diary, write a journal, take photographs, and make a documented account of what's happening in your part of the world right now and over the next year or so. Write it all down, put it in a container, and bury it somewhere. Put it inside the wall in your house, or put it somewhere so that, you know, when they pull your house down 50 years from now or whatever, or 100 years from now, they'll find this time capsule in there and someone might open it and read it and go, wow, so that's what happened back in 2021. Gee, the government and the education department told us all this stuff happened. Because, you know, it kind of, at least it leaves an account for those who come after. Because when you look at history now, history is written by the winners, folks, and it always has been. But what about if we write our own history? What if we start writing time capsules and leaving these around the place and just letting those who come after know what actually happened and what the human race went through at this time? Because I can't see any way out of this apart from non-compliance. I really can't. I mean, unless there's people that operate within the legal system and political system in our countries that are prepared to really do the groundwork and stand up and call this out for what it is and prosecute these people from within the system, then it's going to be up to us. What I can see working is people rediscovering their humanity and saying, you know, who the fuck are you people? You're just people. You're just people. We employ you to do things very differently to what you're doing. And I don't owe you any allegiance. I don't respect your authority. I can't respect your authority anymore because you're not operating within your authority anymore. You've abused that authority. You've abdicated your privilege to any form of government. You've abdicated your privilege to any respect. How can you possibly respect these people after what they've done? And even here in Australia, folks, as I've said so many times, there's 28 names in the federal parliament that are listed as pedophiles, and these names are under 90-year suppression orders. 90 years, 28 pedophiles. All of the rest of the government keeps that going. They keep the names suppressed, and it's going to continue as long as people comply. So stop complying. That's really the best way out. Stop complying and support people who are not complying. You know, I can't see any way through this apart from that, folks. I don't own a credit card. I don't own a smartphone. I don't do any of that shit. I don't vote for them. I don't fill out their tax forms. I don't do any of that shit. And if everybody stopped doing that, what would they do? Nothing. There's nothing they could do because there's 7 billion of us. There's a handful of them. But we just continue to comply with our own slavery, and we want someone to point the finger out without ever pointing it at ourselves. Stop complying with your own slavery, folks. That's the way out of this mess. And that's really the only way out of this mess. And that's been the message I've been bringing you for a really long time. It's all a puppet show, folks. The whole thing's a puppet show. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And as soon as we realise that, well, perhaps we'll find a way out of this mess.